Would you pray with me a moment? Open my lips that my mouth might show forth your praise. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. As I was thinking about this sermon for this morning, I realized that I had a star experience the Easter week of 1997. That year, Easter was really, really early, March 31st, just like it is this year. We're celebrating Easter in March for the first time in I don't know how long. And I had some time off from my job at the University of Colorado, so I drove down to northern New Mexico to go trout fishing, because there's great trout fishing there and it's less crowded than it is in Colorado. But there were also these fascinating Anasazi ruins to go see, and pueblos where people were still living. And it turned out, and it sounds funny now as a pastor, but I arrived during Holy Week. So all the local people in this place called Chimayo were having this penitential processions through town. And I drive in, I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, oh yeah, Maundy Thursday. And if you've ever been to northern New Mexico, the geology is just mind-boggling with the mountains and the canyons and the rivers. But on the way back out of New Mexico, I'm driving back to Colorado, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, which only if you've lived in the Rocky Mountain West, you know what I mean by the middle of nowhere. Not a town in sight, not a line anywhere. And I can see the Hale-Bopp comet off to my left. And if those of you who were alive at that time remember, it was this enormous moving comet in the sky that appeared, and it seemed so close. It was the closest it ever was to Earth. But the skies out there in the desert southwest, the mountain southwest, are so huge. The Milky Way is literally right there. You can see it, and you can see the movement of the stars because there's nothing impeding your vision. And I'm driving along I-25 heading north at 75 miles an hour, and the star is there, and I'm all alone in the cab of my little truck just watching the star, one eye on the road, one eye on the comet, and filled with awe. And time slowed down. And time slows down when you drive in the West anyways, because you're not getting anywhere fast. You know, when it's 400 miles to the next place, it takes a while. But I remember sitting there, just driving along, being totally satisfied, feeling close to the star, to my life, to my breath, connected somehow to the staggering distance, because in my mind, I knew that it was still millions of miles away. But it felt like it was right there. And it felt like God was present. Not as an idea, not like in the Bible or here in a church, but just as God says to Moses, I am present. And this week when I look back on that, I realize that that night was just one in a series of events in my life that was going on at that time, that was leading me to leave my profession as a professor and to go to seminary, not to become who I am as a minister, but to become the person God created me to be, to learn how to love God. That's why I went to seminary, and the church just sort of fell in the wayside. Now, I know this sounds a little strange, but these sorts of mystical experiences happen to me pretty regularly, and they did before this happened, but I didn't know what to call it. I can sit on my front porch down the Cape in the morning and see the sun rising through the trees and listen to the birds. Time slows down. It's absolutely perfect. Listening to the snow falling in the woods this morning, just taking the time to slow down so that you can hear the snow fall. Absolutely perfect. When I was getting married, those of you who remember when you were getting married, it's sort of an out-of-body experience. Standing there and saying these words, watching a child be born, being with people when they die, here in this space, but also in the Cathedral of Chartres, where I walked on the labyrinth and time just stood still, at the top of Pegan Hill. Those times in our lives when any sort of doubt about God just fades away, because, at least for me, I know, not facts about God, but that I am in the presence. I worry sometimes that I'm getting a little cliched because this does come up pretty regularly in my preaching, but it's central to my theology. Now, what I want to say to you today is we people who feel called to follow Jesus are also called to live lives filled with what I call these wow moments. These moments in our lives where all of a sudden we're captured by wonder and amazement that there's something more within and around and above us rather than just what is. That we're connected, intrinsically bound up with immensity. And it's a grace. We did nothing to do it. It just comes to us. Now, I'm not claiming that Christianity is the only faith that has this. Every faith I know has this. I know lots of people who profess no faith who have these experiences. But I'm really thankful that each week, as I open the text and I look at what Jesus has to say to us this week, that I'm struck by these wow moments over and over and over again. That Christianity is not some dry materialism where what you see is what you get, what you can measure, what you can count, dissect, tabulate. That Christianity isn't some formulaic program of ethics and morals where do A, do B, and C is you get to go to heaven. And the truth is, the church has not done well over the last 2 millennia. We've tried to squeeze all of the wow out of following Jesus, I think. We squeeze you into these uncomfortable box pews. I tell you when to stand up and sit down. Churches in some places will say, well, you know, these people are damned, but we're all going to heaven. Women, stay in the back, on the sides. Follow the rules. Believe what I tell you for an hour a week at least. It's a limited delivery system, and I'm a limited deliverer. But sometimes it happens, wow moments. People were telling me in the deacons meeting just this week, last Sunday here was a wow moment for a number of you. Christmas Eve, when we had our candles lit, another wow moment. But what I want you to understand is that shouldn't be the exception. Following Jesus is a wow religion. There's a wild, untamed, unexpected side of life with Christ. And I'm so thankful for that. Because otherwise life could just be the same old, dreary, predictable, inevitable, controllable. But for me, in my life with Christ, there's so much more to it than the task that's in front of me, or even the task before me in my weekly planner. Because it awakens me to the nature of God, that God is wonderful and exciting, but also close at hand and reaching out to me and wanting me to know and see and be thrilled. But not just God. This awakens me to the nature of me, that I'm not alone, that I'm actually worthy of God's attention. And I know there's a gender bias in what I'm about to say, but it awakens me to this idea that life is like a young woman who opens the door to the surprise of her boyfriend with flowers all the time. God is like that, knocking at the door. But not just roses. It awakens me to the reality that my life is part of something much greater. Because the human experience, as we all know, is full of tragedy and sadness and sickness and death. But nonetheless, there's meaning going on. And I'm not about to give you some cheap theology that God does bad things to us to make us stronger, to teach us lessons, or so that others can learn from our hardship about how to be better people and how blessed they are. No. It's much more complex than that. That no matter where I am, and no matter what I'm suffering, and no matter how big my sorrow is, which is just part of the human experience, somehow God is there with me in that, and with all of us in that. And it might sound callous, but these experiences of God also give me a sense of proportion. Because for each of us, the sense of my life is the most important thing to us, right? There's nothing more important than my life. But when you're in the middle of the New Mexico desert, and you're imagining God and the star and the enormity of it, where does it fall? In the immensity of the swirling cosmos and eternity. And yet, somehow God's right in the middle of it with me. It seems incongruous and contradictory, but nonetheless comforting. Now, the thing I find fascinating about the starry this morning, about the three magi and the star, is how true they are to our experience today. Didn't you notice in the reading or at some point in your life, only these three guys in the whole Middle East noticed the star? No one else saw it, right? And they go to Herod and the scholars in Jerusalem. Well, if you've been to the Middle East, Jerusalem is only maybe a dozen miles from Bethlehem down the hill, right? They don't see it either because they're so taught, well, it says in the Bible, it's in Bethlehem of Judea. Go down there and see it. How did they miss it? How did everyone miss it? And what's more, once the wise men showed up, how come no one went with them down to Bethlehem? It's not even a day's walk. Were they fearful? Were they thinking, what does this mean? What will they find? Oh my God, what will they find? Will it change everything for me? Or were they just lazy? Or were they too busy, distracted, or disinterested? You know, this star thing sounds really good, but it can't be better than what I have going on right here. Or where's the benefit or profit for me in it? Maybe they just don't want to see. And I thought about if I was one of those kings. I thought, star, hey, I'm a king. I'm busy over here doing my king stuff. If I go follow that star, the whole kingdom's going to fall apart while I'm gone. Or, hey, I'm a wise man. I'm busy doing my wise man stuff over here. Where's the wisdom over there? That's a dangerous journey. This is the Middle East. We're going to be walking through bandits and all sorts of people. It's safer to stay home. Everyone will think I'm a fool, wasting my time going all the way over there. The list goes on, doesn't it? All the reasons we have why we don't see the star in our lives. These moments when we're suddenly face to face with, for lack of a better word, God. Have you ever stopped to wonder why? Why this one in your times, in your lives? Why now? I wonder how many I've missed because I was too busy. How many other sunrises and flowers and sounds of bird songs and swirling celestial symphonies and the breath of God on my face. It's been going on all the time, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention. My friends, for me this year, the story of the star is about setting out on a journey, a new year, a new life, following the star, staying with these wow moments, because ultimately, like the star in the story, they lead us to Christ in our lives. Allow yourselves to be amazed. See where it will take you. I'm sure it will be places you never imagined. May it be so. Amen.